Do Avatar fans even exist? Like, was anyone actually excited for Avatar 2?
Hi guys, hi. It's me. I'm an Avatar fan. So you want to watch my Avatar video? Oh, come on! So, you know how whenever a big budget movie comes out, every self-proclaimed film analyst and their dog flood YouTube with hot takes trying to decide if thing good or thing bad? Well, if you're one of these people, then wait, save me a seat on the bandwagon. I brought my soapbox. That's right. I'm venturing out into the world of YouTube content creation to add my hot take to the online discourse that you'll probably be sick of by the time I'm done editing this video. But why? Why out of all the things did I decide to make my first video about James Cameron's Avatar? So, because I am an aspiring writer, specifically of graphic novels, and a casual nitpicker of film, so to speak, I do enjoy watching a lot of Lindsay Ellis, Hello Future Me, A Closer Look, Screen Rant, and Cinema Therapy, and things like that. I'm not saying any of this to flex or pretend like I'm any kind of expert, because I'm not. This is just providing background as to how I came across this.
Nobody loves this film. Like, do you know anyone who, when you ask them what their favourite film is, they look you dead in the eye and they say, the 2009 hit James Cameron 3D extravaganza, Avatar?
Really? Really? Alright. I guess I'm doing this now. Well, here I am, everyone. Look no further. I am that elusive Avatar fan the bigger channels don't want you to know about. I thought Avatar was cool long before The Way of Water made it cool again. If I had had the ability and opportunity to cosplay as a 9-foot-tall sexy blue cat alien smurf, heck yes, I would have gone out in all blue with knobby ears, a tail, and a pair of stilts. Though I should probably clarify that the stilts are more because 5'2" me fantasizes about getting revenge on all the tall humans who mock me. Wahahaha! Who's the short one now, dummies? Anyway, so yeah, like the Avatar sequel, this soapbox has been over a decade in the making. And no, I'm not gonna sit by and watch while certain YouTubers revisit the franchise and be like, oh, maybe Avatar good actually, when I've been saying this the whole friggin' time, you cowards! And oh, believe me, as a longtime Blue People Avatar stan, I am well aware of what the critics have to say about it. Oh, it's like Pocahontas or Dances with Wolves or Ferngully, but in space with blue people. Oh, it's so forgettable. What was the main character's name again? It's only good for the visuals. Oh my gosh, the font is in papyrus. Papyrus, I tell ya! Papyrus! There, you little papyrus phobe. It's okay. Your fear is valid. As for the rest of you people, don't worry, I'll briefly cover those criticisms. For the purposes of this video, I'm mainly going to talk about the first Avatar, but do be warned, there will be some minor spoilers for The Way of Water ahead, in case you care about that. And to be clear, I'm not much of an expert on this like I said before, so if you'd rather hear from a more authoritative source, I've linked several other video essays down in the description. One in particular I'd like to highlight is this one by Local. It is, in my opinion, a pretty solid defense of Avatar from a writing perspective, and another reason why I decided to make this video. Go check it out, again, linked down in the description. Part 1, Avatar Forgettable. Well, if Avatar's so good, then why can't anyone remember character names, or say quotes, or make memes? Checkmate, fans! Wow, that's your hot take? Dang, what a rock-solid case you got there. So I've been hearing this one a lot lately, and I'm sorry, it's really dumb. Some person with a hot take can't remember names or quotes or whatever, so Avatar was, as a whole, pretty forgettable. Which is bad, I guess. Let me just quickly make the point here that no duh, you're less likely to remember finer details if you don't like a movie already, especially if your whole goal is to make fun of it and also make fun of people who like the thing that you're making fun of. And I bring this up because that's often the context in which I hear this point being made, and they think they're being so clever for not remembering who Jake Sully was or whatever. Yeah, sure, Jan. The problem with this take is that the question of memorability is multi-layered, given that, for one, we've gone 13 years between installments, during which we saw not only a contrarian anti-fandom arise in response to Avatar's hype, but in that same time period, the market has been flooded with young adult dystopian movie adaptations, Star Wars spin-off after Star Wars spin-off, and so many superhero movies. Oh my gosh, make it stop! And yet, this meme masquerading as critical analysis persists. One example of this is a video from Jack's Films. Basically, he and his buds went around and asked random people to name characters from Marvel or Star Wars, and then to name a character from Avatar. And they did this so they could make the point that Avatar not very good actually. This is a bit of an apples to oranges comparison though, because like I just said, there's a big difference in market saturation between these various IPs. But their logic was, well, if Avatar's the highest grossing box office success to date, then shouldn't people be able to remember at least one name? Of course, only 2 respondents could, so aha! You see? Yes, because we all know that filming and selectively editing conversations with random people on the street is a totally valid research method. What with their statistically significant sample sizes and lack of selection bias and all that. I mean, here I was trying to make a video defending one of my favorite movies, but oh no, I guess I'm wrong because those people over there don't remember who Jake Sully is. What a whimsical misunderstanding! Wow, what am I gonna do? It's not like this argument doesn't fall apart under greater scrutiny. By the way, that was sarcasm. Now sure, most casual moviegoers watched Avatar once or twice, maybe liked it well enough, but didn't think about it much as time went on. That can be said for a lot of movies though, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes we go see a movie to just enjoy it and then we can move on with our lives without overthinking it. There's nothing wrong with that. Personally, I couldn't forget about Avatar and I never even saw it in theaters, let alone in 3D. That wasn't a luxury my family or I could afford. I only saw it later in 2010 at my high school grad party when my friend brought her DVD over. Later in 2012, I ended up buying the special edition director's cut DVD set, and I still consider that to be one of the most valuable items in my collection. Yeah, I'll go for long periods of time between rewatching it, because, you know, it's a long movie, but that doesn't make it any less meaningful, let alone memorable to me. Meanwhile, others were inspired to go into things like VFX specifically because they saw Avatar. I know of at least a couple people where this was the case. I mean, Avatar may not be in their top 10 list of favorite movies, but it's certainly not forgettable in that it played a huge milestone in their career path. The CGI effects that helped bolster later blockbusters were only made possible because of Avatar. I'm old enough to remember the uncanny valley of movies like The Polar Express and Mars Needs Moms. Then, everything changed when the Avatars attacked. Seriously though, I think it's easy to forget just how significant that is for film history. Like, that has huge ripple effects for the modern movie experience. I know I kinda ribbed on Hello Future Me earlier, but in that same video he does make a really good point about how special that technological innovation is. Which is to say nothing of its box office success. And you're making the argument that Avatar is forgettable? To be fair, this CGI and box office angle doesn't really address the heart of this argument, which is that while Avatar's visuals will always be memorable, the rest isn't. At least not if you're looking at pop culture. True, no one quotes Avatar in everyday life and expects the average person to get it. Few people not invested in the story can remember character names, nor do you have large fan communities doing cosplays or writing cringeworthy fan fictions. So yeah, if you're simply measuring a movie's pop cultural footprint, then sure, this is a valid point. But again, the critique here isn't just that Avatar doesn't have a tangible effect on pop culture like other big blockbusters. It's that Avatar doesn't have said effect, ergo, Avatar is of inferior quality. So-so. Mediocre. Bad, even. Look, if this is your litmus test for judging a film's quality, then you have some incredibly high standards. Let's do a thought experiment. Of all the movies that have ever been and ever will be made, how many of them actually make it big enough to be, for instance, quotable for the average viewer in the long term? How many character names can you remember out of all the movies you've seen? Do we make memes for every good movie that comes out? No. Obviously we don't. So, does that mean the movies that don't clear that bar are necessarily inferior to those that do? No. And why would they be? How memorable a thing is in terms of mainstream culture is not, in and of itself, a useful metric in measuring quality. If it was, then there would be no such thing as a good indie film. Like, is this what we're doing now? Is this how we're analyzing film these days? We're just going up to random people and asking them if they can remember any characters from movies that came out 10 years ago, and then conclude, oh, they can't remember it, so the movie must have not been as great as people back then were saying it was. Like, no, why are we doing this? Or are we only doing it because it's Avatar? I can think of plenty of good, even popular movies I've seen that aren't super quotable, or whose names I can't remember off the top of my head. Doesn't make any of them bad or mediocre. One example that came to my mind as of writing the script was Hitch. I couldn't remember any character names besides, well, Hitch. Does that make it a bad movie with no cultural footprint? No! It's because I only ever watch it around Valentine's Day and I'm terrible with names. Aside from Hitch and that adorable dancing dude, whose name is Albert by the way because unlike some people I know how to use a magical thing called Google, none of the characters are very memorable to me in that they bring anything unique to the table either. The lady love interests are pretty standard, recycled romantic comedy tropes, as are all the other side characters. Also, let's be honest, a big reason why this movie received the publicity that it did is because of this magical thing called brand name recognition. But, is any of that necessarily a ding against the movie's quality? No. The Breadwinner is also an incredible movie, one that I actually like more than Avatar, but not many people even know it exists. Go ahead, ask around. Personally, I only know of 2 other people that have seen it. A thing being memorable in mainstream culture is not always a good thing. You want to know some things are included in that quote-unquote memorable category? The new Star Wars trilogy, the series finale of Game of Thrones, Twilight, The Freaking Room. And the new Star Wars trilogy is a mixed bag at best. The Game of Thrones finale is a masterclass in how not to end a series. Twilight exists, and The Room is only famous for how bad it is. Like, I actually haven't even seen The Room, but I've spent enough time in YouTube pop culture film analysis stuff to know what this is referencing.
Did not hit her. I did not. Oh, hi, Mark.
Or I don't know, maybe you do like any one of these things more than Avatar. Fine. I'm not here to argue about why I think your preferred movies are bad, I'm simply here to advocate for mine. Memorability is but one small element in film analysis, and not a straightforward one at that. Don't confuse market saturation with quality. Saying that something is forgettable is a loaded value judgment that could reflect more on how you engaged with the film than anything else. In other words, Doctor, I just don't get it. How could anyone be an Avatar stan? I can't even remember the main character's name. Well, when did you last see it? Like 10 years ago? And did you consider that maybe that's why you don't remember anything about it? Neither film history nor humanity at large necessarily forgot about Avatar. You did. Part 2. Plot is unoriginal copycat. Look, I'm not gonna argue that, no, it's not actually like Pocahontas or Dances with Wolves or Fern Gully at all. No, this is super duper original. That's not what I'm doing. If this video somehow goes viral and a bunch of trolls decide to bomb the comments just to remind me that thing X is like thing Y, then here's my amazing rebuttal. Yeah. So?
Hey guys, psst, come here. I'ma let you in on a little secret. There is no such thing as an original story.
Yes, you could say that some are more original than others and that they add a new twist or subvert something, but even those are still repackaging old legends, formulas, or tropes, or archetypes from whatever culture that story is being told in. That or they draw from real issues or historical events. Inspiration comes from somewhere, it's not created in a vacuum. Evaluate Avatar based on originality if you wish, but if this is your deal breaker here, then why doesn't this also rule out other examples of derivative works? The original Star Trek was basically What If Western, but in space. Actually, wait, hold on. Do you know how often they reuse the same conflicts or sorts of themes throughout the entire franchise? Like, oh no, we got stuck in an anomaly and we were sent back in time. Again. We have all these security protocols and backup systems and carefully encrypted data, and yet the alien villain of this episode is effortlessly getting past them. Again. Help, the holodeck is malfunctioning and putting us all in danger. Again. Oh no, the transporter glitched and it's causing problems. Again. Oh no, there's a... Firefly is also basically What If Western but in space. Same goes for Star Wars with some of its characters. Heck, a lot of its villains could be said What If Fascists but in space. The Lion King was What If Hamlet, but with talking animals that sing. Superman, What If Moses, but alien with superpowers. Warm Bodies, What If Romeo and Juliet, but with zombies. Almost every DC MCU movie follows the same basic formula. Disney's female protagonists are usually, what if musical princess, but like this, or this, or this, or this, or this, or this, or this. Heck, forget Disney princesses. Disney built its whole brand around reimagining old fairy tales. Finally, the hero's journey is so ubiquitous that it might as well be coded into our DNA. You know, I can't help but wonder if the market's present oversaturation with all these movies and shows trying too hard to be original and groundbreaking hasn't poisoned our minds to think that that's what a story needs in order to be good. No. You can have a completely original story, and yet it could be incredibly bad if you're not using your tools properly. A story isn't necessarily bad or cliché simply for being derivative, formulaic, or using tropes. You can pretend all you want that you despise those things and think that the best writers should avoid them like the plague. But the reality is, you can't create something out of nothing. What matters isn't necessarily that you never use things like tropes, for instance. What matters is exactly how you use the materials you have to create an effective story. It is nice to see something new or subversive. Don't get me wrong, I do tend to prefer stories with more nuance and complexity to them. But at the same time, some of the best stories are also the simplest ones. Avatar's plot is simple and familiar, but it's also efficient and, in my opinion, well done in its execution. I again refer you to Local's analysis because he puts it way better than I can. The fact that Avatar draws from recognizable source material is fine. That's how the art of storytelling works. It's how it's always worked. However, one response I have heard to the comparison of Avatar to other derivative works is that while that comparison is valid, many of those movies still have strengths in areas that Avatar doesn't, and, fair enough. Movies are diverse and we're each drawn to different stories for different reasons. However, a good faith criticism shouldn't begin and end with, it's just X but in space. All of these stories have similar plot structures, but they're not the same story. But it's not adding anything new, the haters may say. And you know what? I guess they're right. There's nothing new about Avatar at all. I mean,
It's just a story about a paraplegic former Marine traveling to an alien moon 4.37 light years away to take part in a scientific research/diplomatic mission. That uses what is essentially advanced VR tech to psychically link with a genetically modified body specifically matched to the driver's genome so that they can safely maneuver through a world inhospitable to human-like, what with its low gravity, aggressive fauna, and atmospheric composition that renders the air unbreathable. The Na'vi have an entire conlang as valid as Klingon and Elvish, including a form of sign language, by the way. They live a lifestyle that is in tune with nature, not just philosophically, but also in a way that ties into their very biology, as their nervous systems can literally link, with the nervous systems of other living things, or even with each other in specific contexts. Each of the Na'vi clans have their own specific cultures that, while have things in common, are also distinct in their own different ways, and in The Way of Water we explore one of these other clans, including another race of beings that are intelligent in their own form despite being what are essentially space whales. No, they're actually their own people with their own culture and philosophy, and music and other such styles. Oh, also they believe that a network of energy flows through all living things and that this is what constitutes their goddess Ewa, who is not just a metaphysical concept in this universe, but is a real quantifiable thing that Grace discovers, namely that the connections between the roots of the trees act like the synapses in a brain, which the Na'vi are able to access at specific sites where they can use their little ponytail tendrils to upload and download data like memories. Also, this bio-network, aka Ewa, spans the whole globe and may be an intelligent, sentient form of life in and of itself, and Ewa is capable of observing, learning, and making decisions that ultimately advances the plot. Finally, Ewa is so advanced that she is able to upload a person's entire consciousness and transfer it to a whole new other body. And again, all of this is taking place on an alien moon orbiting a big gas giant with a bioluminescent forest that lights up at night, and a bunch of flora and fauna that all have their own scientific names and biological profiles.
But you're right, it's not adding anything new. Wait a minute. Part 3, characters are one-dimensional. Yeah, okay, I do partly agree with this one actually. Obviously, these are not complex characters by any means. Just like with story, I don't think simple is necessarily bad. However, there are definitely things I would have done differently in terms of character development, mostly as it pertains to a couple of the deleted scenes that I wish had stayed in the final cut, or at least had been modified in some way so that they could have fit in the final cut. That being said, I do understand why these scenes and others were deleted. Any experienced filmmaker will tell you that scenes don't get to stay in a movie simply because they're interesting or make some character look super deep. James Cameron did have a specific vision for these movies, so I get it. And it's for this reason that I don't blame these characters' simplicity on just bad writing. They're simple because they need to be efficient. One could make a fair case that these characters were oversimplified in the process, and again, I don't entirely disagree with that, but that's a different ballpark than them just being badly written in the first place, which is what many Avatar critics will claim. Now, originally I was going to delve into the minutiae of each of these characters and the pros and cons of how they were affected by this whole editing process, but oh guys, my video is already really bloated and I'm so sick of editing. So for my purposes, I'm just going to talk about the villains mostly in this section because, well, that seems to be where a lot of people get really bent out of shape with Avatar. So let's start with where I agree. In terms of how the humans in general are portrayed in these movies, I think there is a flaw in that we don't see more of a spectrum. And as someone with family in the Marines, yeah, it does kind of bother me how the military are portrayed in these movies. Needing and extracting resources or the desire for self-preservation in the face of a hostile threat are not evil things in and of themselves. I think a simple fix to this would have been showing us even just like one or two more examples of reluctant employees who are powerless to really say no, like this guy here. Nothing big, like it could be as simple as two people exchanging a worried glance. That's all we need. Because what these little details do is show us by contrast just how evil Quaritch and Selfridge are, which I think is interesting. Like this guy here, he obviously doesn't care that he's destroying Pandora's environment, but he also doesn't want to potentially put native lives in danger. Selfridge couldn't care less, apparently. He's willing to potentially flatten them to a pancake if it means teaching the natives a lesson. And it's for this reason that, unlike Local, I do think the scene where Selfridge tried to stop Quaritch in the final act should have stayed in the movie. Not because it made Selfridge a deeper character in and of itself, but because it raised the stakes a little bit. It kind of upped the ante in terms of Quaritch, and I don't know, I kind of liked it. It was fun. The movie is totally fine and functional without it, but I think it could have also paid a few things off.
we do see some hints that Selfridge is a little bit conflicted about what he's doing. He's got two different people trying to pull him in different directions. Grace is trying to convince him that there's more to Pandora than just its resources. And then there's Quaritch, who has no faith in the Avatar program and is like, hey, I'll get you access to that big unobtainium deposit easy. No big deal if a few natives die in the process, we're just doing what's necessary, right? Had this scene not been cut, we would have looked deeper into the consequences of Selfridge's choice, which I think is why so many people find this scene compelling. He's given Quaritch too much power and now he can't take it back. He's as powerless as the employee he was pressuring earlier. To me anyway, that's a simple but satisfying payoff. Now, here's where I disagree. In terms of Selfridge and Quaritch specifically, especially Quaritch, I think that they're perfectly fine as far as movie villains go. My comments about that deleted scene notwithstanding.
Yeah, that's right. I said it. I don't think they're bad. Throw all the tomatoes at me you want, you haters. I'm gonna make tomato soup out of your hate.
Okay, cringy joke there aside, let me clarify. I don't think they're great examples of movie villains, but I don't think they're bad either. They're perfectly serviceable for the movie of Avatar. Remember, just like with story, complex is not inherently better than simple, nor is simple always the same thing as flat or one note. Adding complexity to your characters just for the sake of complexity does not improve your story. Your story needs to have focus, a central premise upon which its plot and the characters hang. And if the complexity you're trying to add doesn't serve that premise, or worse, distracts from it, then guess what? It doesn't need to be there. This is not to say that you can't microdose your characters with some interesting details here and there. Not everything needs to be 100% relevant all the time, but you do need to be very intentional on not only what to include, but also how and when. Let me give you this example. What does this scene tell us about Selfridge? Well, apparently he really likes golf. Now, is this detail in and of itself relevant to Avatar's premise? No, not really. But it's not just about playing putt-putt in the office, is it? No. Showing us this minor detail quickly establishes relevant character traits. We see the kind of callous, self-absorbed attitude that Selfridge carries himself with. And this attitude informs his later interaction with Jake, where he and Quaritch manipulate him into pushing the Na'vi out of their home. But let's say this was taken a step further, where for some reason we went into this big backstory about Selfridge and his dad, and how the two of them played golf all the time, and they also built the company together. But then the dad died a few years ago of cancer or whatever, and so now Selfridge plays putt-putt in the office because it makes him feel closer to his dad. Now on its own, is this an interesting, humanizing little detail? Sure. But is it functional? Is it relevant? Do we as an audience really need to know this much about a relatively minor character? No. And why? Because this is not Selfridge's story, is it? He's not even the main antagonist. Placing this much emphasis on a small detail of a minor character implies that you're setting up something that's going to pay off later. But then if you don't pay it off, then, well, it's just this floating little piece of filler that just, it's distracting. It doesn't need to be there. Now, as far as Quaritch goes, who is the main antagonist, I think you can make the case that he could have used a few more lines or small interactions that might have humanized him or clarified his motivations a bit. But beyond that, does he need to be any more complex in order to serve this story? Honestly, no, I really don't think so.
What? You think it's fine that Quaritch is simple? Go back to writing 101, you noob. Any English teacher will tell you that characters need to be—
No. Stop it. Do not, I repeat, do not play that Writing 101 card. Because at the end of the day, it's just that. Writing 101. Vaguely remembering what your English teacher told you 10 years ago in an introductory creative writing class does not make you an authority on good character creation. And no, I'm not claiming to be an expert authority either, but there isn't just one right way to do things. I know there's endless volumes of video essays about various three-dimensional characters like people in the Game of Thrones, Zuko, Thanos, Gollum, and so on. And I feel like too many people are interpreting that to mean that that's what all characters, particularly villains, need to be like, which isn't true. Different stories have different purposes and needs. When you internalize the misconception that simple equals bad, what you do is conflate interesting with good or well written. A character examined in isolation may be interesting, but it is possible to write an interesting character that's also poorly written from a narrative standpoint, as in, they don't function well within the greater plot. It's not simply that they're complex, but how relevant are they? Do they influence the plot, the conflict, or other characters? What role do they play? Do their motivations narratively make sense? If you don't accomplish these things, then no matter how complex or three-dimensional you make your characters, your story's gonna fail. And the same thing applies when trying to make a subversive villain. Case in point, Hans in Frozen. Need I say more? So, how does Quaritch function in Avatar? Well, in the first half of the movie, you've got Jake the protagonist torn between two worlds. On the one hand, he's falling increasingly in love with Pandora, the Na'vi, and so on. But then on the other, he's still loyal to humanity and specifically to Quaritch. In the beginning, there's a connection between Jake and Quaritch. Quaritch is a military man who speaks his language, and Quaritch is also promising him something compelling, something that Jake really wants. He wants his legs back. Then, as the plot progresses, Quaritch starts filling the role of character foil for Jake. While Jake is adapting to Pandora by increasingly falling in love with it and learning to respect it, Quaritch learned the opposite. He learned that the only way to survive on Pandora was to fight, and his end goal isn't to protect the environment of Pandora, but to conquer it. And this tension between Jake and Quaritch continues to build up until we get to the final fight between these two, which pays off so much. Yeah, these are simple characters, but they work. Neither of them needed to be particularly complex in order to do this, especially not Quaritch. Honestly, it probably would have just been distracting if Quaritch were made more complex. You could make some minor adjustments, but beyond that, he's totally fine, and the same goes for Selfridge. But all the time I see critics be like, "Oh, these villains, these cartoonishly evil humans, they're just irrationally evil just because. We don't know why they're evil, they're just bad and not fleshed out, and it's so shallow and one-dimensional." Okay, fine, that's a bit of a straw man, but in any case, the whole irrationally evil argument, what exactly is that trying to say? What do they mean by irrationally evil? That they're not three-dimensional? Why do they need to be three-dimensional? Are they trying to say that they're irrationally evil in the narrative sense? That they don't have clear motivations that logically inform their choices or drive the conflict in the plot? Because neither of those things are true. Both Selfridge and Quaritch have some pretty clear motivations. Those motivations may be simplistically presented, but nevertheless they're there, they're organic to the story's conflict, and they logically drive these characters' actions. Or is what they're saying that these motivations are just conceptually irrational altogether? As in, we need some kind of rational explanation as to why they're so greedy. Why are they so evil? Okay, there is a bit more merit to this one, at least in regards to how the non-scientist humans are portrayed in general, which I've already addressed. But at the end of the day, is the whole concept of evil itself something that we can rationally explain? No, not really, not even in storytelling. Sometimes you can do this, but trying too hard to do so can also serve to neuter your villains. Villains don't always need extensive backstories or explanations for why they're evil. Sometimes it's fine to just say, they're evil. For instance, did we need to know why Biff in Back to the Future was such a bully? No. Did we need to know why Darth Sidious was so evil? No. All we needed to know for both of these characters is that they're the bad guys, they're the ones we want to see get their comeuppance. That's fine. Wait. Try this one on for size. Fire Lord Ozai. The big existential threat in Avatar: The Last Airbender is an incredibly one-dimensional character when you think about it. Oh no, I'm gonna light my comment section on fire. Ugh. Here they come. Here come the torches and pitchforks. Everyone brace yourselves! I swear, I'm not trashing on The Last Airbender, I promise. I'm a fan of both Avatar franchises. Wait, you can do that? But seriously, what do we know about Ozai? He's cruel, abusive, and power-hungry. And that's it. We don't even see his face until season 3, and even then we barely see him. At what point do we really get to know him? When is he fleshed out?
Seriously, more time is spent developing what are effectively his henchmen. What other justification are we given for his villainy besides he wants power? So, using the logic of simple equals bad, would this not make Ozai a relatively flat, one-dimensional character? Maybe. But is that a bad thing in this case? No. In fact, doesn't that work well with this story? Yes. Again, it's not always a question of simple versus complex. More importantly, it's how are they functioning within the plot? Let's go back to Darth Sidious. For me, when someone says cartoonishly evil, he's an example that comes to my mind. He's basically the embodiment of pure and that is fine. We don't need any more big details about him. And no, I'm not getting into the extended lore, and your fanfiction doesn't count. Let's focus on Return of the Jedi here. Say whatever you want about Sidious's simplicity here. Try saying that 5 times fast. What lies at the heart of this movie is this question: can Luke redeem his father? Which means that there needs to be a very compelling, powerful force pulling Vader in the opposite direction of Luke. And that's what Darth Sidious is. He doesn't need to be fleshed out or complex in order to do this. He just needs to be a compelling force and temptation for Vader and Luke. Fire Lord Ozai has a very similar function in The Last Airbender. Ultimately, Ozai exists not just to be an existential threat to the whole world, but basically as someone who puts pressure on other characters' arcs. Fleshing him out more would have taken focus away from Team Avatar, which is where our focus was meant to be. Compare this as well to classic Disney villains that remain favorites even today, as opposed to the, well, subversive villains or lack of clear villains at all in more modern Disney movies. And those classic Disney villains, yeah, they were pretty much evil just cause. Why was Ursula evil? Why was Scar evil? Why was Maleficent evil? Don't know. They just were. That's just how they rolled, and we loved it. Oh, by the way. Okay, but why do I bring these comparisons up? Well, because honestly, a lot of the criticisms lobbed at Quaritch's character could just as easily apply to a lot of other more iconic villains, including the great big villain of one of the most memorable shows of all time. Now, obviously, Quaritch is nowhere near the same level of iconic as Fire Lord Ozai, and that's okay. He's a different character in a different story. Of course, this does bring up the point that while you can get away with a simple villain, what about your protagonist? What if all the characters in your story are relatively simple? And I mean, I get it, Jake is certainly not the world's most memorable protagonist or iconic hero. I do like Neytiri a lot, but even then, yeah, she is simple. And why? Well, because ultimately, these characters are not the ones you're meant to connect with. Pandora is. James Cameron wasn't going for an original story or memorable characters. He was going for immersion. So Jake in that regard is basically the avatar, pun intended, for the audience. And in that way, don't think of Pandora simply as a setting, but as a character in its own right. Now, maybe that kind of storytelling isn't for you, and that's totally okay. And I do understand the demand for more psychologically driven narrative or characters. Arcane is a really good example of this. I love that show. And I also love Avatar. And Avatar is not Arcane, but you know what? Maybe that's okay. Personally, I don't need all of my favorite shows or movies to be all the things all the time. I don't revisit the Blue People Avatar because I want to connect with the characters. I do it because I want to connect with the world. And that is totally fine. On to a few miscellaneous items. Okay, one thing I gotta get out of the way really quick.
Yes, a planet full of trees has no oxygen.
Dude, it's an alien planet!
Is there air? You don't know!
Okay, nope. I'm done. Not gonna do any more cinema sins, I just needed to get that one off my chest. On to a more serious topic. You, or maybe a lot of people around you, may be shouting that Avatar is just a great big white savior story that's problematic, and well, you're not wrong. That trope is definitely there. I wasn't blind to it when I first saw the movie. In fact, it's part of why I wish Sute didn't die in the end.
Your mileage will vary as to how much this trope bothers you, if at all. I'm not here to take sides in that debate. That's a discussion well beyond the scope of this video. What I will say though is that I don't think this argument is always brought up in good faith. And I don't mean that it's not a valid point in and of itself. There's definitely a reasonable discussion to be had about the ethics of taking inspiration from cultures you're not part of, and if your point is simply that James Cameron should be more respectful in how he does this in future movies, I absolutely agree with that. No, what I mean is that some people will bring this up not so much because they're actually that concerned about the harm it causes for Indigenous peoples as they are that it gives them another reason for them to hate a movie that they already hate. And the way I can tell is that you read the rest of that person's analysis and they're not really engaging with the text of the movie at all. They're just using a bunch of recycled memes or straw man arguments that make me wonder if we're even watching the same movie. Whereas the white savior stuff is just kind of tacked on to make their arguments feel more legitimate than they actually are. But you take that away and nothing about the analysis really changes. Their opinion of the movie doesn't improve. It's just there. It doesn't hold any real weight on the rest of their analysis. And more than once I have seen someone comment that it is appalling that a movie appropriating indigenous cultures is being played by an all-white cast. It's not. Seriously, how are these people so inept at using Google? It takes 5 seconds! And the problem with the people who do this is that they treat it like it's a black and white issue where their opinion is the authoritative one when that's not true. There's a diversity of opinions as to how impactful Avatar is for Indigenous peoples, including Indigenous peoples themselves. Some people like it, some people don't have strong opinions one way or the other, some might be a little offended but still like the rest of the movie for what it is. And if you are an Indigenous person who's watching this video and would like to leave a comment about how this movie impacted you for better or for worse, please do so. I am genuinely interested in seeing what you have to say. And you know what? I take those sorts of critiques a lot more seriously than I do coming from some random white kid on the internet that's probably never actually met a Native American person in their life and is just latching onto this white savior stuff because it just makes them feel more valid in their opinion. And considering that this is a criticism of the white savior trope, if this is you, you know what? It's a touch ironic. I'm just saying. Oh, speaking of ironic, there's this video from a YouTuber called Sideways that basically talks about how Cameron wanted James Horner to create a truly unique musical style for the Na'vi, and Horner attempted to do this by incorporating a bunch of different musical styles from cultures all around the world. But then Cameron dropped the project when, surprise surprise, the demo sounded too alien. Ironic, wouldn't you say? I do like this video. I think it makes some pretty good points, and if you're interested in just analyzing Avatar's musical style, then yeah, the context around that pre-production is rather ironic. I think that was a missed opportunity, and I would like Cameron to try to incorporate some of that original effort into his future movies. That being said, I don't think this ruins Avatar as a whole. I don't think it's fair to fixate on some flaw from the pre-production such that you throw out all the other merits of the movie. Believe it or not, you can hold these two things in your mind at the same time, namely that you wish they would have made different creative decisions in pre-production, but you still enjoy the final product for what it is. Related to this is the question of why the Na'vi look so human despite being on an alien planet where most of the other fauna featured have 6 limbs. For that matter, why do they have what appear to be breasts and nipples when they're not placental mammals? What's the point in making a big-budget sci-fi movie where you could do virtually whatever you wanted with creature design and yet stick with these aliens that are eerily humanoid and analogous to life forms on Earth? Well, because there are limits to human empathy, guys. Why do you think it's easier to get people to care about saving pandas than some endangered fish, snake, worm, beetle, or plant? Because the panda is a lot more like us than any of those things. It's cute, it's fuzzy, its physical characteristics and behaviors resemble ours. So our brains, which are hardwired to recognize the tiniest nuances of the human face, have a much easier time relating to the panda than something like an insect. The further away you go from us on an evolutionary scale, the more, alien and thus unknowable the thing will be perceived as. Again, remember that the whole point was that you were coming to empathize with Pandora and, by extension, the people of Pandora. There's a fine line you have to walk between making something alien and yet not making it so alien that it breaks immersion because you can't recognize it.
You can certainly learn to empathize with other life forms, it's not impossible, but it is an uphill battle, particularly when you're talking about a film that's trying to be accessible to a global audience. Bear in mind that James Cameron was taking an incredible risk with the first Avatar. They had to create a proof of concept before they could even get the movie greenlit. Sure, we can all gripe about how he could have taken more risks in the designs and musical score, but these critiques are being made in hindsight. A lot of people have a hard enough time with the ponytail thing. What makes any of us think that making the Na'vi more alien would have increased its mass appeal? So I find this critique a bit disingenuous considering that the hard sci-fi elements that are there are often made fun of or considered, "Oh, it's so weird, look at those blue cat people, oh, it's so weird, ponytails." Going back to Sideways' video, when we think of James Cameron's reaction to the original demos, instead of considering him just as some shallow colonizer filmmaker, consider him more a stand-in for the average Western viewer. Let's be real. If more of that unique musical style were in the original score, how many people would have liked it or would have been like, "Oh my gosh, this is so weird, what am I listening to? Ugh." And you could certainly make the case that people need to be more open to different musical styles than what they're used to. I agree with that. But that's not where we are, and it's certainly not where we were in 2009. There are certainly more criticisms I could cover, and if I didn't cover your favorite criticisms, I'm sorry. This video is already really long, and if I'm being honest, I have no idea what I'm doing. Why did I think this was a good idea? Ah! So yeah, if you're not satisfied with what I've said, or you think my video sucks, please leave a comment. Boost that algorithm. I would love it. Alright, so if by chance you've made it this far into my video, you may still be wondering, why? No, really, why did I make this? Was I, a total noob with only minimal recording equipment, jumping into YouTube just because I'm that much of an Avatar stan? Well, yeah, kind of, but there's more to it than that. This actually isn't the first time I thought about making a video for YouTube. I'd been thinking about this for a while as the video essay format opens up new expressive avenues that are difficult to get across in a blog post. No, I'm not letting you vultures of the public see that blog. It's old and cringe.
No, stop it, shoo, go away, shoo!
But this was the first topic to give me enough motivation to actually get to work. Or to be more specific, it was the so-called haters of the Avatar franchise that got me going. Let me clarify some semantics here though. When I say the haters, hate train, or the anti-fans, I don't mean to imply that Avatar's reception is a binary, liked it or hate it sort of thing. More accurately, it's a spectrum, with most people residing in the middle area here, where they don't have strong opinions about it one way or the other. These are not the people I'm referring to when I say the hate train. I'm talking about the people over here, a certain anti-fandom that arose in response to the massive hype that Avatar 1 got. This is where most of the space Pocahontas meme stuff originated from, more or less. Essentially, anti-Avatar memes of the hate train took over the narrative, and it's hard to deny that that's poisoned the well for a lot of people, even if they are otherwise part of the mid-spectrum. This became all the more apparent to me after I saw The Way of Water, which, while not flawless, was a wonderful movie in my opinion. Certainly people's reactions are going to be subjective, but there is also a very distinct effect that this hate train has had on the so-called discourse surrounding this franchise, if it could really be called discourse at all. Shortly after I saw The Way of Water, I went and read some user reviews on IMDb and... oh boy. Basically, a lot of the really negative takes on there were more reflective of the fact that that person probably went into the theater with the foregone conclusion that Smurf-a-Hunt is stupid, and so they were looking for reasons to not like The Way of Water either. If you'll indulge me in some self-serving cherry-picking for a moment. It's pretty. It's also pretty boring. There was no climax. There definitely was. Oh, this guy. Doesn't it ever rain in Pandora? Why, yes, in fact it does. There are at least 2 different scenes in The Way of Water that show this. Oh, but don't worry, he's also concerned that they got glowy sprinkles on their face now. Dude, they've always had those! But why do they have to be invincible, big, and blue, and say bro all the time? Yes, because we all know that only white people ever use slang. The visual effects were great on the actual Na'vi people. Everything else just looked like a PS5 game. Yeah, so? Who cares? Why is that a big deal? Jake keeps repeating the gag-worthy line, a father protects his family. That's what gives him purpose. Except that throughout the movie, he fails to protect his children because they break their rules all the time. And they never come to the conclusion that maybe I should actually listen to what my parents say. A child does a stupid thing. We get drama. I'm going to assume this person doesn't have kids. Hey guys, did you know? Did you know that The Way of Water is copying off of Titanic, The Abyss, and even Jaws? Because there's one scene where a vicious sea creature tries to eat one of the main characters, just like in Jaws. And The Abyss because... water, I guess? And Titanic... well, I must have missed the part when Neytiri asked Jake to draw her like one of his French girls. Must have been part of date night. Or where she was like, I won't let go, Jack! But sure, I guess it is ripping off the Titanic because ship get broken and go down. When Pitch Meeting did this, at least it was funny. We start with a hurried introduction to the plot through some narration. Jake is a happy dude and he's made some kids somehow. None of this is explained well because of Wait, you need an explanation for that?
Well, you see, when a mommy blue alien and a daddy blue alien love each other very much, they decide to...
Oh, I'm sorry. You needed your hand held through every stupid little detail, you CinemaSins brain-poisoned walnut. Oh, these people. Okay, it's fine. You're okay. It's okay. You can get through this. So, yeah, reading those was... fun. And when I started to think of how the hate train or reviews like those would color people's perceptions who might have otherwise enjoyed the movie, which would then affect the feasibility of future Avatar movies, and, that really bugged me. And that's basically what was going through my head when I came across that clip from Hello Future Me earlier. What I didn't show you though was how he later continued that thread.
Except I need to apologize, because I lied to you before. When I said that I couldn't find anyone whose favourite film in the entire world was the 2009 James Cameron 3D extravaganza hit Avatar, well, I could. Let me introduce you to the die-hard Avatar fan community you can find mostly scattered across comment sections and Reddit posts.
Ah, yes. So he did find the elusive Avatar fans after all. And he found them scattered in select comic sections, or the deepest, darkest corners of Reddit. And those silly Redditors don't understand the joke of this meme. That's hilarious! And before you say anything, yes, I know, I literally just cherry-picked my own screenshots earlier. However, let me point out a key difference. I was poking fun at specific critiques those people were making. They weren't just saying, I hate Avatar, or, this movie is total trash. That's a subjective thing I can't really argue against. But with Hello Future Me, the joke is, these people really, really love Avatar, and that's funny? Oh, but he continues.
I do not want to bash people for their love of the 2009 James Cameron 3D extravaganza hit Avatar, but I do have to wonder what types of films these people are watching. To call it the greatest sci-fi film ever made when we have the likes of most other sci-fi films, or the most ambitious and futuristic,
Okay, this right here really rubbed me the wrong way. And I know that he's mostly just teasing here, he means it in good fun, and I take him at his word that he's being sincere in this comment. I'm also not saying that I'm pulling a Karen and going, unsubscribe, no, the rest of his video is fine actually, you should go check it out. But however good-natured he tried to be here, this is also incredibly condescending. Granted, no, I don't think Avatar is the most ambitious of all sci-fi, and it is a little weird that someone would say it is. But even then, so what? Who cares?
I just have to remind myself this is all very subjective.
Yeah, exactly. Now let me emphasize again, I know he means well here, I don't think he's part of the hate train necessarily. Obviously, you can be critical of something without necessarily being an anti-fan. That's fine. But here's the point I want to make here. While he might have meant it well, a lot of other people don't. This is far from the only time I've seen or heard someone do this sort of spiel where they're like, "Oh, where are all the Avatar fans? Do they even exist? Oh wait, there are a few over there. Oh my gosh, they're so cringe. Look at them. They're so silly. How could they think this is such a good movie?" Which, in turn, can really influence how some people might treat others who have different tastes in movies. So remember that friend I mentioned in part 1 who brought her Avatar DVD to my high school grad party? Well, we were sitting at lunch a few weeks before that where she was talking about how much she loved that movie, and some punk just inserted himself into the conversation, basically like, "Oh, it's so stupid, it's a ripoff of Pocahontas." And he said a few other things too, but I don't really remember what they were anymore. But my friend had some fairly reasonable rebuttals to everything he said, but he didn't care. He wasn't actually interested in talking about the movie. He just wanted to let her know how he thought it was stupid that she liked a thing that he didn't. And while I wish I could say that was an isolated incident, it kinda wasn't. And it continued well after I left high school. Which is part of why I don't buy into this whole Avatar forgettable trope. Not when a bunch of anti-fans basically decided for everyone else whose opinions on Avatar were valid and whose weren't. Like, you seriously don't think that something like that isn't going to affect the broader culture's willingness to revisit a movie? I mean, let's be honest, for a long time, it wasn't cool to say you liked Avatar as more than a guilty pleasure or mindless escapism. At least, not on the internet anyway. And that elusive Avatar fan was basically the butt of the joke. It wasn't that Avatar fans didn't exist at all, it was that the few that did exist were very niche, very cringe, easily dismissed, and whose opinions were not worth listening to because stupid thing is stupid. For this reason, I was actually kind of embarrassed for a while to really admit to people just how much I liked this movie. And I'll freely admit that at least half of that was more my own social anxiety than how people would have actually treated me, but that anxiety didn't spawn out of nowhere. Because whenever the Blue People movie was a topic of conversation, well, for every person that said that they liked the movie, there would be at least 2 other people who would make dumb Smurfahontas jokes or otherwise be dismissive or downright condescending towards people who they decided just didn't have good taste in movies. They don't know what good movies are, what good sci-fi actually is. Because it wasn't just that they didn't personally like the movie or thought it was overhyped, which is totally fine. No, it was that they decided that their opinion was the correct, cultured one, actually. All it was just dumb, mindless, escapist trash, you see. A bunch of pretty colors. Nothing really that substantive or new. And they kept insisting over and over again that this was just downright forgettable, to the point that any real merits of the movie got lost in the conversation. You tried disagreeing with them or arguing with them about it, and they'd be like, no, shh, shut up. It was forgettable. I distinctly remember one guy responding to an Avatar fan with that whole Avatar forgettable argument being like, "Name one quote from the movie," or "Name one character." Because apparently that person's amnesia was so strong that he could project it onto a fan? I tried to go back and find that thread so I could screenshot it, but honestly, it was a few years ago and I don't even remember what YouTube video it was on. However, I did find a more recent example of this. For context, this was the opening comment, and here's the reply. To be fair, I think he's more specifically responding to this other reply who mentions being 7, but he's also talking about Jurassic World or something. I don't know what's going on there, but in any case, you have another example of a guy thinking that Avatar is so forgettable that even people who like it can't name characters or quotes. Please tell me how this is supposed to make sense! Obviously, this doesn't represent everyone who doesn't like Avatar, and I can't stop you or make you change your mind if you just don't like this movie. But in these sorts of comments, there's just this undercurrent of snobby elitism within the rhetoric. This comment someone made on one of Local's videos is pretty emblematic of what I mean here, where, sure, you can like Avatar if you want, no one cares, but you're stupid, uncultured, and have awful taste in movies if you do. And behold, here are 2 more IMDb screenshots that are basically saying the same thing. As if the person liking the thing that you don't doesn't have valid reasons worth listening to as to why they like something? Like, different movies mean different things to different people. For instance, one thing I'd like to point out, especially regarding Hello Future Me's point that it's weird that anyone would consider Avatar the most ambitious sci-fi film of all time. You know, a lot of Avatar fans are not from Western countries. Maybe they have different tastes in what makes a good sci-fi movie, or maybe they don't have access to the same kind of sci-fi movies we do. Or in any event, maybe something about Avatar really resonates with them and their culture that doesn't for us. And there's nothing wrong with that. Why must good sci-fi or good cinema only be decided by Western tastes? One of the quirks of the Avatar franchise is that, well, yeah, its hardcore fan base is kind of niche, its appeal is accessible to a global audience. That's a big part of why it's been such a box office success. It's accessible to more than one demographic. And you know what, if I am talking to someone who hasn't been exposed to that much more sci-fi and is saying Avatar's the most ambitious thing ever, my response would be, that's cool you think that. If you like Avatar, here's some other sci-fi things you'd probably like too. In fairness, I'm not going to pretend that I've never been this kind of a jerk to fans of other franchises. Like back when I was first getting hooked on Avatar, I was very much on the I hate Twilight train. I was so entrenched in that mindset. And I'm sorry, it was stupid and snobby. I mean, I still don't like Twilight, I still think it's poorly written, but it's fine if you like it. There's nothing wrong with that, and it certainly doesn't reflect a person's IQ. And no, this anti-fandom never reached the same level of vitriol that it did for Twilight, thank goodness. But when the Way of Water trailer dropped, suddenly you had all these people pretending like nobody cares, no one wants sequels, gosh dang it James Cameron, stop it, Avatar sucks, nobody's an Avatar fan. Or worse, actually hoping that the movie would bomb just so you could feel smug. Because apparently hoping for the failure of a passion project that hundreds and hundreds of people have been working incredibly hard on is okay? Granted, before I saw The Way of Water, I was a little skeptical about how good it would actually be, but in any case, it was really annoying for me to keep hearing things like, no one really thinks about Avatar. No one remembers it. No one quotes it. No one remembers any of the characters' names. Nobody loves this film. And there I was, standing in the proverbial corner, just wanting to say, I do. Before Local released his Avatar analysis, his channel only had a few subscribers. Then it quickly blew up to over 16K and counting after that video went live. I'm one of those subscribers, because not only did I find his work engaging, but I felt seen. Many other people did too. And the same goes for Nathan Zed's videos on Avatar. Movie Overload also has a decent revisit of the first Avatar movie. Check out Rowan J. Coleman's retrospective on Avatar as well, it's a really good video. Loverboy Media also makes wonderful points about Avatar's visual appeal. There are no shortage of Avatar fans commenting on each of these videos. Maybe we're a niche group, but we've always existed. Maybe you just don't hear about us as much because, you know, we're relatively content to just sit back and enjoy the movie. And you know, credit given to where credit is due. Despite his teasing, Hello Future Me does make a genuine effort to try and understand why certain people love Avatar so much. He says that they're really drawn into the beauty of the world it presents, and he validates that. He doesn't minimize it at all, and I appreciate that, I really do. Because when a lot of other critics bring it up, they don't treat it as valid. They just brush it off like, oh, they just like it for the pretty colors, that's it, it's just hollow spectacle. So it is really refreshing for me to hear Hello Future Me validate that and not treat it as trivial, because it's not trivial, at least not to me. But going forward, I would like to dive a little bit more into that concept because yes, the visuals are a big part of it, but there's a lot more to it than, ooh, look at the pretty colors. And by going forward, I do mean in part 2, because I was originally going to have this all in one video, and then I realized, holy crap, this is really long, this is a big project, my hard drive is running out of space, and my poor brain needs a break, guys. Besides, I have some ideas for effects that I want to incorporate into the visual analysis that are going to take some time to really perfect. And if I fixate on that, then the rest of the stuff will never finish and I won't be able to get this out in a timely manner. So I've decided to just release this part 1, and then in the next video we'll go into the visuals, and then maybe there will be a part 3 that will talk specifically about the Way of Water. And no, this channel's not just going to be about Avatar. I mean, yeah, that's going to be my first 2 or 3 movies, I guess. But I do plan on talking about plenty of other things in this new channel I've created. I have lots of random, sporadic thoughts or opinions and soapboxes, so yeah, here we go. We'll see how the YouTube projects pan out for me. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you stay tuned for the next videos. Like or subscribe, comment, share these videos with your friends, and yeah, tell me what you think down below. Oh, and a special shout out to my 2 stupid cats who would always conveniently seem to get the zoomies whenever I wanted to record new audio. Thanks, you little brats.